There was a time when a person did the right thing, even when nobody was watching. Discipline wasn't loud, it was steady, private, and it built a whole life. Most of us have let that go. My name is Elijah Holloway, and I've learned these lessons the hard way over a lifetime. If you'd like wisdom that only comes from living it, subscribe. That's what I share here. So let me show you how they did it. Come and sit with me a while. Pull your chair up close and let an old man talk to you the way my grandmother talked to me, slow and sure, with nothing to prove and nothing to sell. Because what I want to lay upon your heart today is a thing this loud world has near about forgotten. It is the quiet thing, the unseen thing. It is the way the old folks carried themselves when there was not one soul in the room to watch them do it. I was raised in a small house where the floorboards sang under your feet, and the walls were thin as paper. My grandmother kept that house, and my mother before she went on to glory, and there was an order to that house that I did not understand until I was a grown man with children of my own. My grandmother rose before the sun. Every single morning of her life, before the birds had found their voices, before the light had come up over the field, she was already on her knees beside that bed. Nobody made her do it. Nobody was watching. There was no one there to praise her for it, and no one there to shame her if she had stayed abed. But she rose, and she prayed, and she began the day the same way she had begun 10,000 days before it. And I asked her once, when I was a boy and did not know any better, Grandmama, why do you get up so early, when the whole house is asleep and nobody would ever know the difference? And she looked at me with those tired, kind eyes, and she said, "Child, the Lord knows, and I know, and that is enough. That is enough. Hear those words, because I have carried them my whole life. That is enough." She did not need a crowd. She did not need one soul to see her. She had an audience of one, and she lived her whole life before him in the light and in the dark, in the crowd and in the empty room. That is what discipline was to those old saints. It was not a performance. It was a way of being when the doors were shut and the lamps were burning low. Now, the world today has it backward, and I want you to see just how far backward it has gone. Today, a person will do a good thing, and before his hand is even done with the doing, he has got his phone out to show it to strangers. The whole of his goodness is turned outward, toward the eyes of people he will never meet. And I tell you, a virtue that must be seen to be practiced is no virtue at all. It is a costume. It is a thing you put on for company and take off the moment you are alone. But the old folks wore their character like their own skin. It did not come off. It was the same in the dark as it was in the day. Let me tell you what discipline looked like in that house, because it was never a loud thing. It was 1,000 small things done faithfully, over and over, with no reward but the quiet knowing that you had done right. My grandmother made her bed the moment she rose, corners tucked tight, and no one but the Lord would ever see that made bed all the day long. She washed her one good dress by hand and pressed it careful, though she wore it only to church. She kept a clean floor, and she kept her word about the smallest things, for if she told a neighbor she would carry a pot of soup on Thursday, then Thursday that soup came, through rain or through sickness, because her word was her bond, and a broken word was a kind of theft to her, the theft of another soul's trust. And she was honest with money down to the very penny. If a shopkeeper handed her back a coin too many, she walked the whole way back to return it, though it was a thing so small that no living person would ever have missed it. That was the shape of the whole business: small, quiet, faithful, unseen. Now, before I go on any further, let me pause here for just a moment. A long life gives you more than any one video could ever hold. The lessons my own folks handed down to me, the ones I learned the hard way, raising a family of my own, I finally sat down and put all of it into a book. Start to finish, laid out plain. Simple life lessons that stand the test of time, the kind of wisdom that only comes from living it. The link is pinned right at the top of the comments. That's the whole of it, in one place, no need to go hunting through videos to find it. Take it or leave it. Now, let's get back to it. Now, I want to walk you through the roots of that old discipline, not with headings and not with lists. For these things do not live in tidy little boxes. They live down in the marrow of a person. And the first root was this: they did right because it was right, and for no other reason under all of heaven. There was a man in my grandmother's church, a deacon named Brother Samuel, who worked the night shift down at the mill. And every night, on his long walk home in the dark, he passed a little store where the back door was often left standing unlocked. One morning, the owner of that store, a hard and suspicious man, said to him, "Samuel, how do I know you have not been helping yourself all these nights, passing my open door in the dark?" And Brother Samuel, I heard this told 100 times when I was coming up. Brother Samuel looked at that man and said, "Sir, the same God who watches me in the daylight watches me in the dark. There is no hour when I am off duty from my own conscience." And he tipped his hat and he walked on home. That is a man whose discipline did not hang on a lock or a lamp or a watching eye. His honesty was not held up by the fear of getting caught. It was held up by something far deeper and far stronger, the settled conviction that he lived his whole life in the sight of God, and that a thing done in the dark is written in the very same book as a thing done at high noon. And I want to ask you plainly, because this is the heart of the whole matter, when nobody is watching you, who are you? When the door is shut and the phone is face down and there is not one soul who would ever know the difference, what do you do then? Because that, and not the polished face you show the world, is the true measure of the man or the woman that you are. The old folks knew this. They believed the truest test of a person was never how you behaved in the crowded church house on a Sunday morning, all dressed up with everybody looking. The truest test was how you behaved on a Monday night, alone, tired, tempted, with the whole world asleep. Character, they understood, is simply what you do when you believe it does not count. And it always counts. It always, always counts. Now let me tell you about the second root, which was the faithfulness in the small and the daily. The old people understood a truth that we have gone and lost, that a life is not built in the big, dramatic, cinematic moments. A life is built in the small ones, repeated 10,000 times over. Nobody's grandmother became a woman of iron character in one grand, heroic afternoon. She became that woman one early morning at a time, one kept promise at a time, one swept floor, and one washed dish, and one honest day of labor at a time, stacked up over 50 and 60 and 70 years, until the whole of it stood like a stone wall that no storm on this earth could ever throw down. We want the wall without the laying of the stones. We want the harvest without the daily hoeing of the row. But the old folks knew there is no such thing, and there never was. Discipline is not a feeling you sit around and wait to have. It is a thing you do especially and precisely on the mornings when you do not feel it. My grandfather worked a field all his days, and I asked him once if he ever woke up not wanting to go out to it. And he laughed at me. He laughed out loud, and he said, "Son, I have not wanted to go out to that field one single morning in 40 years, and I have gone out to it every single one, because the field does not care how I feel. The corn does not grow because I am inspired. It grows because I show up. Do you hear me? It grows because I show up." Now I want to talk about a hard one, a root this soft world does not want to hear about, and that is the discipline of doing without. They knew how to do without. They knew how to say no to their own selves. This is a muscle, beloved, and it is a muscle our whole age has let go soft and weak. The old folks practiced self-denial like it was a discipline of the soul, because that is exactly what it was. My grandmother could want a pretty piece of cloth in the window, a sweet from the store, and she could look at that thing and want it, and simply decide that she did not need it and walk right on by. And she taught that to every one of us. She would say, just because you want it does not mean you take it. Just because you can does not mean you should. There is a whole strength in the not doing. There is a quiet power in the closed hand. Today we are taught the very opposite of that, from the cradle up. We are taught that every appetite must be fed the very instant it wakes up. Every hunger satisfied now. Every want a want that must be filled this hour. Or else we feel we have been robbed of something owed to us. And so we have raised up a whole generation that cannot wait, cannot save, cannot deny itself. One single thing, and then we stand around and wonder why so many are so miserable, so restless, always grasping, and never once filled. The old folks could sit inside an empty want and not die of it. They could go without. They could save the good thing for later, or give it away entire to somebody who had less. And that saying, no, practice daily in the small things, is the very thing that made them able to say no in the big things, no to the temptation, no to the shortcut, no to the lie that would have been so easy to tell. The person who cannot deny himself a sweet will not deny himself a sin. But the person who has practiced the small no all his life has the strength standing ready when the great no is required of him. And this brings me to the deepest root of them all, the one holding the whole tree up, and it is this: they believed they were accountable. They believed with their whole hearts that this life was not a thing you got away with. They lived every hour as people who would one day give an account of it, every idle word, every secret deed, every dark and hidden thing brought at the last into the light. And I tell you, that one belief changes everything about how a person carries himself when the door is shut. It is one thing to fear a man who might catch you. That kind of fear walks out the moment the man walks out of the room. But it is another thing altogether to live before a God from whom no room is ever empty, no hour ever truly private, no corner ever fully dark. That kind of accountability does not leave when the company leaves. It goes with you into the locked room. It goes with you into the midnight. It is there when you are utterly alone, and it is the whole reason the old folks were the same person alone as they were in the middle of the crowd. My grandmother used to examine her own day before she would let herself sleep. She would sit on the edge of that bed in the lamplight and go back slow over all the hours. Where had she been short with someone? Where had she let a hard word fly? Where had she come up wanting? And she would set it right in her own heart before she would allow herself to close her eyes. Nobody assigned her that. There was no one grading her. She graded her own self, honestly, every single night, because she believed that an unexamined life just drifts, and a soul that never once checks its own course will wander far off without ever knowing that it wandered. We do not do this anymore. We fill up every quiet moment with noise, so that we never once have to sit alone with our own conscience and hear what it might say back to us. But the old folks made friends with that quiet. They sat down in it on purpose. And in that quiet, alone, unwatched, they did the hardest and most private work there is in all this world, the work of keeping their own soul honest. Let me tell you a thing about honesty in the small matters, because that is where the old folks proved themselves, and it is exactly where most of us fail without even noticing that we have. My grandfather found a wallet once, lying in the road, thick with a poor man's whole week of wages. And there was not a camera in all this world back then, nor a soul who saw him stoop to pick it up, and he could have kept every dollar of it, and no one on earth would ever have been the wiser. But he walked 4 miles in the heat of the day to carry it back to the man it belonged to. And when I, as a foolish young man, asked him, why 4 whole miles, Granddaddy, for money nobody even knew you had, he set his jaw, and he told me, a man who will steal when no one is looking has already stolen. The only thing left is the finding out. He understood that the theft happens in the heart, in the dark, in the deciding, long before any hand is ever caught at it. And so he guarded the hidden places of his own heart, the very way another man guards his own front door. And they were disciplined in a place we hardly even think of as discipline anymore. And that is the tongue. The old folks kept their words, not only their promises, but their very speech. My grandmother would not carry a piece of gossip across the road if you paid her gold to do it. Somebody would come to her all lit up with a juicy tale about a neighbor down the way, and she would go quiet, and she would say, now, is that yours to tell? And that was the end of it. She kept other people's troubles the same way she kept her own folded up and private and out of sight. And there was nobody standing over her, making her do it. There was no reward at all in the holding of her tongue. It would have been sweeter and easier by far to talk. But she had disciplined that tongue the same way she had disciplined her hands and her feet and her early mornings, quietly, daily, for the sake of a clean conscience, and for no applause whatsoever. And here is a word about the way they handed it down. For I know some of you are raising up children, and you are wondering how on this earth you plant a thing like this in them. The old folks did not teach discipline with lectures. They did not sit us down and give us grand speeches about our character. They taught it the only way it has ever truly been taught in the history of the world, by letting us catch them doing right, when they believed we were not even looking. I learned more from the sight of my grandmother on her knees in the gray dark of the morning, when she believed the whole house was fast asleep, than I ever learned from any words she spoke to me in the broad daylight. Children do not become what you tell them to become. They become what they catch you being when you did not know that they were watching. And so the discipline of the unseen life is the greatest inheritance you can ever leave to a child, not because you performed it for them, but precisely because you did not. And they caught you at it anyhow, and they understood in that quiet moment that this is simply how a person is made when that person is made right. And I want to say a word about the ordered home and the ordered body. For the old folks believed the outside of a life and the inside of a life were tied together with one string. They kept themselves clean and neat, not for pride, and not for any eye that might see them, for often there was no eye at all. A man would rise in a lonely house and still shave his face and press his collar and start his day like a man who respected the day and respected himself. My grandmother's kitchen could have fed a king off the floor, and no company was coming. She rested proper too, when the rest was earned. For the old folks understood that discipline is not the grinding of yourself down to a nub. It is the keeping of a right rhythm, work and rest, labor and stillness, each in its own season. They rose with a purpose, and they lay down with a clear conscience. And the ordered life between those two was itself a kind of quiet worship, offered up where only heaven could see it. So let me gather all of this up now and bring it on home. Do you see what I am trying to hand you today? It was never about being watched. That was the whole secret of it, the thing hidden in plain sight. The old folks were disciplined precisely because they had stopped performing for the eyes of other people and started living instead for the eyes of God and the verdict of their own conscience. They rose early when no one saw it. They kept their word when the breaking of it would have cost them nothing at all. They denied themselves when indulging would have gone entirely unnoticed. They examined their own hearts when they could have coasted right along. And out of 10,000 of those small, unseen, unrewarded, faithful acts, they built a life that stood a life with a spine in it, a life you could lean the whole of your weight on, a life that did not crumble the very moment the crowd looked away. And here is the good news I want to leave in your hands, for I did not come to shame you, and I did not come to sell you grief. That old discipline is not gone. It is not dead and buried. It is only waiting to be picked back up by anybody willing to go and do the quiet work again. And you can start tomorrow morning. You can rise before you feel like rising. You can keep the small promise that nobody would ever miss. You can do the right thing in the empty room, the honest thing in the dark, the hard thing that not one living soul will ever praise you for, and nobody will clap. Nobody will see it. And that, beloved, is exactly the point. That is exactly the place where the real building happens in the unseen place, brick by brick, day upon day, until one morning you look up and find that you have built a whole life, and it is a life that stands. Do not despise the day of small things, beloved. Do not sit and wait for some great and shining moment to make you into a disciplined soul, for that moment is not coming. There is only this ordinary morning, and then the next one, and then the next. The whole of a faithful life is hidden down inside the plain and unwatched hours that everybody else just throws away. So take up the hidden hour. Take up the unseen faithfulness. Take up the quiet no, and the kept word, and the honest heart in the empty room. It will feel like nothing at all on any single given day. But time is not mocked, and neither is the God who keeps the books. What a person sows in the dark, that shall he surely reap out in the light, 30 and 60 and 100-fold, until the harvest of it comes to astonish even his own eyes. Now, I want to hear from you, and I read every single word you write down for me. Tell me down below, who was the disciplined one in your own family? Who was the grandmother, the grandfather, the mother, or the father who did right when there was nobody there to watch? Say their name in the comments, and tell me what part of the country you are writing from, because I do love to see where these old saints once lived and where the memory of them still burns warm. Let us go and remember them together, and live worthy of their good names. And when you are ready for it, I have another word already prepared for you. The next time we sit down together like this, I want to talk with you about how the old folks kept the peace in a troubled house, how they held a whole family together through hard and bitter times with nothing but patience and grace. Until then, go on and do the quiet work. Do right when nobody is watching. The Lord sees it, and that, as my grandmother told me, is enough.